the highest paid actor in Hollywood, accused of domestic violence. His career destroyed in a matter of days. Dropped by Disney from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. A spiral of drugs and alcohol that never really stopped. Removed by Warner from Fantastic Beasts. Leaked audio recordings exposing a relationship completely out of control. A televised trial against his ex-partner watched by the entire world. And finally, a verdict that changes everything again. But it wasn't just his career on the line. Explosive romances with some of the most famous women in the world. Intense relationships, chaotic and deeply public. Love stories that began like a dream and ended in scandal. Because before the trial, before the fall, Johnny Depp was already living on the edge. But this story didn't start there. Johnny Depp wasn't born a star. In fact, his childhood was far from stable. He grew up in a family marked by constant change, moving from place to place, and ongoing conflict. His relationship with his parents was tense, especially with his mother, and from a very young age, he began to channel all of that into rebellious behavior. Drugs, trouble at school. Nothing seemed to suggest that this kid would one day dominate Hollywood. But there was something that set him apart: music. Before he ever thought about acting, Johnny wanted to be a rock star, and for years, that was his only goal. But before we continue, there are 3 key details that help explain the origins of his future financial downfall. 1. For years, Johnny Depp was one of the highest paid actors in the world, but he was also living a completely excessive lifestyle. 2. Properties, extreme luxury, constant spending, a fortune that seemed endless, but was being drained at an unsustainable pace. 3. Over time, everything came to light: lawsuits, debt, and conflicts with his own financial team, proving that even at the very top, everything can fall apart. Acting came almost by accident. Through connections and unexpected opportunities, he ended up auditioning and landed a role in A Nightmare on Elm Street. He wasn't the lead, but it was enough, because Hollywood started to notice him. Soon after came 21 Jump Street, a television series that quickly became a phenomenon. Johnny played a young undercover cop, and within months, his face was everywhere. Magazines, posters, teen bedroom walls. He became a teen idol overnight. But the problem was, Johnny hated that. He didn't want to be a product. He didn't want to be just the good-looking guy. He felt like he was being boxed in, and that if he didn't act fast, his career would be stuck there forever. So even at the peak of his popularity, he started turning down projects, making unusual choices, and deliberately moving away from everything that had made him famous. He rejected roles that reinforced his teen idol image, refused to be just a TV heartthrob, and began looking for darker, stranger, less commercial characters. Decisions that, at the time, made no sense to the industry, but would ultimately change the course of his career completely. While other actors were chasing fame, Johnny was doing the exact opposite. He chose roles that were strange, dark, uncomfortable. And that's when a key figure enters his life: Tim Burton. Together, they created characters that were completely outside the norm. Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, Sleepy Hollow, Johnny stopped being just an actor and became something else, an artist. But he also began to solidify something that would stay with him forever, his attraction to the unconventional. But before we continue, there are 3 traits that say a lot about who he really was. 1. Johnny Depp didn't just play unusual characters. He often lived like one, even off camera. 2. He had uncommon obsessions and collected strange objects, building an identity that became more and more eccentric. 3. On set, he constantly improvised, something that fascinated directors, but also created tension with producers because of how unpredictable he could be. And then came the role that changed everything, Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean, a character no one understood until they saw him on screen. He was different, over the top, unpredictable, and it worked perfectly. Johnny went from a cult actor to a global superstar, millions of dollars, massive contracts, the highest paid actor in Hollywood. But while his career was rising, his personal life was becoming more and more chaotic. Johnny Depp never had simple relationships. His romantic history is filled with famous names and intense stories, passionate relationships that often ended badly, conflict, public breakups, and a pattern that kept repeating itself. Everything was intense, too intense. Winona Ryder, an iconic 90s romance, young, intense, with an engagement that ended abruptly. Kate Moss, a relationship defined by excess, parties, and a chaotic dynamic that fueled his rebellious image. Vanessa Paradis, one of his most stable relationships, the mother of his children, which also came to an end after many years together. Amber Heard, the most controversial relationship of all, the one that would ultimately trigger his public downfall. At the same time, other problems were beginning to surface. Excesses were no longer occasional. They were becoming part of his daily life. Drugs, alcohol, and a lifestyle that was becoming more and more out of control. On top of that, constant multi-million-dollar spending, properties, extreme luxury, impulsive decisions. A fortune that once seemed endless was now starting to shake. And a life that, little by little, was drifting further and further away from balance. And then, Amber Heard enters the picture. At first, it seemed like just another story. But this was not going to be just another story. The relationship was intense from the very beginning, and quickly, it started to fall apart. Accusations, conflict, scandal, until everything exploded. Amber Heard publicly accuses Johnny Depp of abuse. The world is shocked, and Hollywood as well. In a matter of days, everything changes. Johnny's public image collapses. Disney drops him from Pirates of the Caribbean. Warner removes him from Fantastic Beasts. Project after project begins to fall apart. A career that once seemed untouchable suddenly isn't anymore. And for the first time, Johnny Depp is completely outside the system. And it wasn't just about losing roles. It was about losing his place in the industry. His name starts disappearing from major projects. Brands begin to distance themselves. Studios avoid being associated with him, and everything that once opened doors now starts closing them. For a time, Johnny Depp is no longer a safe bet, and in Hollywood, that changes everything. But the story didn't end there. Years later, the trial begins, a televised trial, followed by millions of people all around the world. Every statement, every gesture, every reaction, seen and analyzed in real time. Audio recordings, testimonies, intimate details, exposed to the public, private conversations, personal arguments, moments that were never meant to be seen. All of it in front of a global audience. Social media explodes, opinions divide, debates intensify, and for the first time, the narrative begins to shift. What once seemed like a closed story starts to reveal another side, another version, and what once felt definitive begins to transform into something completely different. Because now, this was no longer just about accusations, it was about what the world was watching in real time. And finally, the verdict arrives. And this time, it is clear and decisive. The ruling favors Johnny Depp after weeks of total exposure, cross-examinations, audio recordings, evidence, and testimonies seen around the world. Everything comes down to a single moment, a jury decision in Johnny's favor, and the impact is immediate. The news spreads within minutes. Headlines, reactions, millions of people following the outcome in real time. Public perception begins to shift. What once seemed certain no longer is. Johnny Depp's name returns, but this time from a different place. No longer as Hollywood's untouchable star, nor as the villain of a media narrative, but as someone who endured an unprecedented public downfall and managed, at least in part, to rebuild his image in front of the world. But the damage had already been done. Years of exposure, lost contracts, a career halted at its peak. And even though the verdict marks a turning point, the question is no longer just what happened, but what remains after all of this. Because in Hollywood, getting back to where you once were is a completely different story. Johnny Depp was many things: a rebel, an idol, an artist, a scandal. He built a unique career and also came close to losing everything, because in his story, talent and chaos always went hand in hand. And even though the world has already delivered its verdict, there's still something left unresolved: his legacy. Because in Hollywood, falls can be public, but comebacks are never guaranteed. But if there's one thing Johnny Depp proved throughout his life, it's that he never played by the rules. Not when he was a teen idol. Not when he became a global superstar. Not even when he lost it all. Because while Hollywood looks for certainty, Johnny Depp was always the opposite. Unpredictable. And maybe that's exactly why his story isn't over yet. This was Behind the Icon, and this was the story of Johnny Depp. A story of success, excess, downfall, and rebuilding. If you're interested in the stories of the world's most iconic figures, their successes, their downfalls, and everything that happens behind the scenes, subscribe to the channel, because on Behind the Icon, there's always another story to tell.